Hello, 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 and welcome to all beautiful souls out there. And you're listening to the Restore My Soul podcast. I am your host, Princess Millens, the founder and president of Blessed and Beautiful International. And my mission is to help women push through grief and burnout so that they can experience health in every aspect of life. In this space, you will hear personal stories, practical information, and expertise from myself, as well as my special guests. We do not offer medical advice, but women can learn to heal by creating a mindset to grow past their grief using biblical principles. No matter if the loss is from death or divorce, there is hope for restoration. So let's push through this grief together, one episode at a time. Kids grieve too. This is something sometimes we don't understand or we don't consider or even realize, especially when there seems to be no distress in our kids. But just as adults need support in their healing journey, kids do too. They are living and breathing recipients of grief also. So I wanted to bring value to the parents today that may be struggling with how to help their children grieve. So I have a special guest, Deandrea Freeman, which is my daughter, but a mental health advocate in her own right. But she is here to help me and all of you make sense of how to help our children, sometimes in the midst of our own grief. I want to welcome Deandrea Freeman to the podcast today. She is my daughter, and we've experienced the challenges of grief, loss, and healing in our own lives, individually and collectively. But Deandrea is also a mental health advocate, especially for our youth, and she is a podcaster. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in human services with a concentration in marriage and family therapy. She is an RBT, which is a registered behavior technician, and she has worked in the therapeutic environments with children ages 3 all the way up to 17. And she is also on her way to establishing her own therapeutic clinic that serves children and adolescents with counseling services and specialized workshops that are so much needed in our community. And lastly, she is also the host of the Millennial Mind Podcast, where she shares her experiences as a millennial to let others know that they are not alone in this life journey. So welcome to the show, Deandrea. And I am also so glad to have you here to add value to the conversation about how do we help children in the whole grieving process. So let's dive in with how do kids grieve and what does it look like?
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mom. Also, Miss Millens. But for kids, when they grieve, it is essentially, it looks the same as adults, but for them, they it kind of depends on the age group. So you got the younger kids. So between 3 and 5, they're more child-centered. They're very egocentric. So they believe that the world revolves around them, and they also believe that when someone dies, they may come back alive. You have the ones that are between 6 and 12. Those are the school age children. They may see death or grief as a major disaster or crisis. And that can interrupt their age appropriate activities, and it kind of forces them to increase, I guess, their development, if you will. Then you have adolescents. So there's the more school age children for real. Now they deal with those self-esteem issues and those identity issues. And, they're them losing somebody. What does that look like? What does life look like after I have lost somebody? And then that can look like a lot of things. So in younger kids, that could be serious problems. That can be loss in daily activities and hobbies that they like, loss of appetite, inability to sleep, excessive excessive overthinking of that person. And as they get older, they can feel those physiological things a lot more as well. So they might feel a heaviness in their chest, a tightness in their throat, even feeling that empty feeling, or the empty stomach feeling. And they even may feel guilt about something that was said or not done, because now that they've lost that person. Also, when you get a little bit older into the teenage years as well, they have mood changes because they are going through a lot of hormonal changes at that time. And so they may even sense the deceased presence, because they're ruminating over these thoughts and these things that should have been done, could have been done. And that can ultimately affect their activities with their peers, because at that age, peer is life. My friends are life. And that also can look like emotional regression for them as well. So they may even go backwards. So that may look like bedwetting. That may look like not eating on purpose. It really just depends. But ultimately, them grieving looks a lot like us, but they're unable to explain how that may look.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that just like adults, we have to be aware of how children grieve and what it looks like, so that we as parents, we as caretakers, as family members are able to identify it quickly. And especially if it's not so obvious, and just to be able to take action in and with if we need it. So that's very good information. So, as we understand and know how kids and children, our youth grieve and what it looks like, what are some ways that we can help? So, I think that's the thing that we want to kind of bring out today is what is the action steps, and what are the things that we can do to help our children grieve?
Yeah, so that's honestly the easier part, I think. It's about 5 things I would suggest parents to do. The first thing ultimately is listen and validate. Listen to what they're saying, listen to their body, listen to the things that they are showing you, and validate that. And what that means is you're listening to how they're feeling, but you're also letting them know how they feel is absolutely real. It's absolutely real. And it is a true thing for them, because a lot of times, parents will say, oh, you don't need to be crying, or, they're in a better place or whatever that is. But that's how you grieve. You forcing that on your kid is not allowing them to feel how they really feel. And you're ultimately invalidating those feelings. Second thing is plan ahead. If you know that grandma is on her deathbed, go ahead and have that conversation and let them know, hey, grandma is very sick. This is something that may happen. This is what this may look like. Also, if there is someone that has passed and their anniversary is coming up for them passing, go ahead and let them know, like, hey, this is coming up. Would you like to do something special? Would you like to, go visit their grave? Would you like to, just go ahead and plan ahead, so that those feelings that may come up, you're already ahead of it, because you were expecting that to happen. Another thing is create new memories. Create new memories and rituals. So if that person is they like to bake in the family or whatever, okay, they like to bake, make a new recipe. So they like to make chocolate chip cookies, okay, maybe you want to try oatmeal raisin, or maybe they want to cook food instead of baking food. Just finding new ways to make new memories to also include that person. And then encourage creativity. So that may look like creating a art project for them, or creating a memorial in their name, or creating a scholarship fund, especially for the older kids. They may want to do things that honor that person, so to keep their memory alive. And then the very last thing, volunteer. Whether that's volunteering your time, whether that's volunteering, talking to them, whatever that may look like, volunteer. Sometimes when you go out and see other people grieving, or other people in the same positions that you are in, you're able to have a better grasp on how you can better help your child, and also how you can better grieve yourself. So if you do any of those things, I promise your kid is going to be just fine.
Yeah, and that's great information because sometimes I think as parents, we feel at a loss of how to help our children because we're trying to find ways to even help ourselves. But to include our children into the grieving process is a very good thing to do. And I had to learn this personally because when we lost Anthony, especially at a young age, you all were 20, 22, 23, 24 years old, but it was still a pain that I had to even help myself and try to help you all as well. And one of the things that I know that we did together was to include things that we can do together to honor his memory and to put grief in a good place, in a good outlet, in a good area, even that we can even help other people. So that is some good information I think that parents will need in this season. Knowing how to help our child grieve is a perfect segue into, well, how do I tell my child about the bad news in the first place? A lot of times we are hesitant and fearful about having a conversation with our child, let alone help them, because we don't know how to break the news to them. So, what is your answer to that question about how do we tell our children bad news?
Well, the first step is changing your mindset. You have to change your mindset around uh, telling your child bad news, because a lot of times adults and as parents, you are trying to stop the inevitable, and you don't even know what's even about to happen. Because sometimes, and that's why sometimes when you tell your kids news, they they don't react how you thought they would, because you already had in your mind how you thought that they were going to react. Because yes, you do know your child, but you trying to stop something that may already happen, we have to change our mindset around that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, um yes, you need to have tact in how you say things, but just say it. Just say it. I mean, you don't have to be brutal as far as, well, uh, me and your dad hate each other and I never want to see him again and he get on my nerves. You don't have to say that. But you can just say, hey, your dad and I, we feel it's best for us to separate. We still love you. There's nothing that, you can do, and just leave it at that. But you trying to not tell them certain things and telling them things ultimately hurts them, because they are not fully aware of what is even happening. And so that can bring up even more questions if versus you just telling them. So just tell them, don't do it in a way that obviously is going to scar a child, but you want to make sure that you tell them. If that is, somebody did pass away, okay, just tell them. Just tell them. If you did lose your job, just tell them. Yes, they may ask questions, but if you don't tell them the full truth by trying to coddle certain things and leave out certain parts of the story, it's going to end up hurting them. And so once you change your mindset around, oh, well, they might not take it this way, they might not take it this way, and also making sure that you don't coddle them, You're going to be just fine. And then the last tidbit for telling your child any bad news, you have to understand the development stage that your child is in. Little kids, they understand to a certain extent. So, like I said earlier, those kids are very egocentric. Like the world, it revolves around them. So, when you tell them bad news, their idea of bad news is uh Woody on Toy Story is about to die. That's bad news to them. You telling them that they might not see their grandma again, that's not bad news to them, because in their mind, she's going to come back because they're going to see her again. You know, they
Wow.
may not see her in a week or two, but they're going to see her again. Whereas a teenager, they might not see it like that because they are very well aware that when somebody dies, you're not going to see them again. When there is loss, there is true loss. So you have to understand that developmental state or that developmental part that they're in, because again, you're trying to stop something and you don't even know where their mindset is because you don't understand that they don't understand it the way that you do. So you have to just have a better mindset around what is really bad news, because bad news to you is not bad news to your child.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know it's a tough job to break bad news to children, whether it's about death or divorce or drastic changes in their living environments. And I'm a personal witness to this because I remember when my mother passed away, your grandmother. I don't believe I remember telling you all how sick she was. And I remember the day that we picked you up from school and she was literally on her deathbed. And y'all came back to that room that we had just left a week ago. And now she was gone. So we never really talked about what that did to you all. But I remember even at the funeral how Anthony was just taking it so bad, and we really never talked about this, but this is just a good information and information that I wish I had 20 years ago. But this is good information to apply because I believe that our response sets the tone to either help our children or hinder them from getting through that bad situation. And none of us are perfect, but we have to start somewhere, and that somewhere is what we have talked about today, and how we can help our children in the grief and the healing process. So that's our time today, and I want to thank you so much, Dee, for joining me today. And we have a great foundation, I believe, of how we can help our children in their grief. But before we go, I need you to let everyone know where and how to connect with you.
Well, everybody, this has absolutely been a pleasure. But if you want to connect with me further, I am on both Facebook and Instagram at the Millennial Mind Podcast on both. That's at the at symbol, the Millennial Mind Podcast on both. And my personal page for both is Deandrea Shanice. Okay. So you can link with me. I'll follow you back. I got more content if you want to hear more about the kids. I talk about it all, but this has absolutely been a pleasure. Thanks, Mom.
Okay, well, thank you again so much for adding value to this episode of Restore My Soul. Let me encourage you today. We must never leave our children out of the grieving process, I don't believe. They need love and support just like we do as adults. And knowing this, we must be able to teach them with our words and our actions of what to do and how to grieve in a healthy way. And if we teach them while they are young, they will already have the tools in their tool belt when trouble comes into their lives down the road. It's not that we desire bad things to happen, they just do. Proverbs 22:6 says in the New Living Translation, Direct your children unto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. That means when we teach them now, our children and the generations after them will be equipped with what they need to pull themselves out of the grips of grief and provide a stable foundation for their emotional healing. So let us just be committed to getting resources and learning the strategies we need, not just for ourselves, but so that our children will have what they need too in their healing journey now and throughout their lives. Hey, be sure to check out my book, It's Okay to Cry Kids by Princess Millens, on Amazon as a paperback or a Kindle ebook, or you can visit my website at blessedandbeautifulinternational.com. It was very important to me always to include the children, our youth, in the grieving process and be attentive to what they need. And I wrote this fictional story to help kids be able to process what's going on when they grieve. So be sure to check it out.
Before we end today's broadcast, I would just like to put everything into perspective with the personal experience. As you've heard through this episode, my family and I also experienced grief and loss. As a child, losing my grandmother was pretty hard, but it made it even harder because it felt so sudden. My parents chose not to tell me the truth, and ultimately my grandmother's death came as more of a shock than of one of sadness. It wasn't until much later I was actually able to process the loss. I wish that my parents had just told me how sick she really was and that losing her was more likely than not. I feel that difference would have allowed me to understand that the last time I saw my grandmother was actually the last time I was going to see her, and not hoping to possibly see her later. If my parents knew any of the information I've shared today, I'm sure that process may have looked different. As I have gotten older and gained a little bit more information around children and loss, my only hope is that moving forward, I want all parents to know that there will be many losses in your child's life. Some of those losses you will not be able to stop your child from happening. Just make sure that they know that they are loved no matter what that loss may look like, and that their feelings around that loss are valid. Also, I just want to thank my mom for letting me do this final word for today.
With this, we have come to the end of today's episode, and I hope you had a great time listening. I want to thank you all for joining me right here every Friday at 6 p.m. So be sure to leave your reviews and tell me what struck you most about this episode. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on any new releases. Also, please just share this episode and this podcast with as many people as you can so that they can join in on this Restore My Soul movement. And then lastly, I invite you to follow me, Princess Millens, on all social media channels. Well, that's my time, and I will see you in the next episode.